Today on Bad Kids Don't Exist, we're diving into a topic that every parent, caregiver, and educator needs to hear. Why building resilience starts with letting kids struggle a little. It is so natural to want to shield kids from hard moments. Whether it's solving a tough problem, losing a game, or facing disappointment, we often feel like stepping in will make things better. But here's the truth: those small, age appropriate struggles are actually some of the best opportunities for kids to grow stronger, more confident, and more emotionally resilient. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Stuart Perry, but most people know me as Mister Stu. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a child therapist, and an autism spectrum disorder clinical specialist. Here on Bad Kids Don't Exist, I help adults better understand kids so kids and their caregivers can thrive. And today's topic gets to the heart of that mission. Helping kids build resilience doesn't mean fixing their emotions or shielding them from challenges. It means guiding them through those moments so they can learn and grow. And that's what we're talking about today. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone who might find this information helpful. That way we can all work together to spread some understanding and help more kids and caregivers thrive. Now let's get to it. If you are watching live and you have a story of a time you saw a child in your life show resilience, I would love to see that story. Please post it in the comments. And if you are watching this video after it has gone live, please post stories of children showing resilience into the comments on this video. I would love to see some of the great ways that you are already seeing resilience from the children in your life. But before we talk about how to build resilience for children, let's talk about what resilience really means. We all want resilient kids, but what does that resilience actually look like in childhood? What can it mean for the kids in our lives? I see often that people have a goal they want children to attain or to work towards, but they don't have a clear definition of what that goal would be. It's that they want the child to show more respect, but what does that look like? So let's talk about what resilience actually is for kids. If I was going to give you just the most basic definition of resilience in childhood, I would define it as the ability to bounce back from challenges. That's going to be really important. The ability to bounce back from challenges. You've probably heard the mantra that if you fall off the horse, you got to get back on. Or if you fall down 9 times, you got to get up 10. That is resilience. That ability to keep going when something is difficult or to try again when it doesn't work out how you wanted, not just giving up easily or giving up because it didn't work out the first time. And it's also important to understand that it's this ability to bounce back, but also resilience isn't something kids are born with. It's learned through experience. Now, babies are resilient in other ways. Today, I'm talking about challenges and being able to bounce back after things don't go your way. But if you've ever had a baby, you know that sometimes they bump into things or fall over. When I was a very young child, I was running around. My brothers and I used to put newspapers down on the carpet in our living room, and we would run and slide on the newspapers. I do not recommend that you do this, but we would run and slide on the newspapers and just slide around and be having a great time. Well, one time I was running and sliding and I ran and slid and fell, and my head hit the fireplace, and my head just started gushing blood. And my dad said he thought that that was the end of me. Well, They got me to the hospital and they stitched me all up and they said, "Oh no, the head just bleeds a whole lot. He'll be fine." Who knows if I turned out okay or not, but they got it all taken care of. And sometimes there are things that happen with babies and little kids where we think, "Oh my goodness, this is it. That's it." And it can be amazing to see what their bodies are really capable of withstanding. The bumps and the scrapes and the falls sometimes are things that kids can go through. And yes, that's a resilient factor that they are just born with. But this ability to bounce back from challenges is not something that kids are born with. It's learned through experience. And I told you it was going to be important to talk about that bouncing back from challenges. So if you combine that bouncing back from challenges with understanding that resilience isn't something kids are born with, then that can explain why protecting kids from every challenge can unintentionally prevent them from developing resilience. Let me explain. If resilience is bouncing back from a challenge or being able to keep going through a challenge, if you never let a child go through a challenge, then they can't bounce back from it or they can't keep going through it. So preventing them from the challenge at all is preventing them from being able to bounce back or keep going. And if it's something that kids aren't born with, then it's something they have to learn. And it's not something that you can sit down with a child and tell them to keep going and tell them that they need to try again. And that just puts all the connections in the brain and that's just going to make them try hard and do it. No, they have to practice that skill. And as they practice it more and more and more by bouncing back from challenges or continuing to go through difficult times, that is how they can develop resilience. So, resilience is that ability to bounce back or keep going. It's not something that kids are just born with. They have to learn it through experience. And protecting them from every challenge can prevent them from developing resilience, which means they're going to become more dependent on you, more reliant on you, and less able to regulate themselves, tolerate discomforts, and bounce back or keep going through difficult times. If this idea is resonating with you, make sure you like this video and follow and subscribe on the channel for more on how you can help your child thrive. Resilience can be such a difficult topic because it's hard sometimes to watch kids who we care for so much and love so much as they're struggling. And as the tears start flowing and as they're just dealing with difficulties, it can be so hard. So let me explain to you why watching some of those things, even though it can break your heart, why it is a positive thing to help kids struggle some. Did you know that? Did you know that a little struggle is one of the best ways to help kids grow? There are things that we can allow children to do and allow them to face and allow them to go through that are manageable things for them that can build emotional and mental strength. Let me just give you a couple of examples of things that you can be allowing your child to go through that can develop some of this resilience, but why that struggle is one of the best ways to help kids grow. I'm going to talk a little bit later about some actionable ways that you can really implement techniques to build resilience for kids. But right now, let me tell you some of the science of resilience. For instance, if a child is learning a new skill, which is something that we want kids to do, we want them to be learning, we want adults to be learning, but let's say that they're trying to learn how to ride a bike. Most kids are not going to ride a bike correctly the first time they get on a bike. It's going to take some time. It's going to have some falling over. It's going to have some scrapes. It might even have a little blood. There might be some of those things that happen. And as kids do those things, they're building this tolerance for patience. And it can encourage their persistence. And it also encourages confidence that, oh, that wasn't the end. Just because I fell off the bike doesn't mean that I give up. It means if I want to learn how to ride a bike, I'm going to have to get back on the bike. Think about allowing a child to learn how to tie their shoes, and you're teaching them how to tie their shoes. They are going to mess it up, and there are going to be times when they take off their shoe and slam it on the ground, and there might be times where they just yank the laces as hard as they possibly can because they are feeling all of that frustration. And when you allow them to continue going, even though they are facing all of those challenges, it builds that persistence, and it builds the confidence in them, because if you take it from them, then what you're saying is, oh, you can't do this, I need to do it for you. So when you allow them to do it, then it builds that confidence in them, and that leads to resilience. Or even solving puzzles or problems from schoolwork. If it's difficult and they're having a hard time, that doesn't mean to make it easier, and it doesn't mean to take it away from them. It allowing them to go through that struggle, that developmentally appropriate struggle, builds tolerance and persistence and confidence. Another one is managing disappointment. We in our world today have gone to this everybody gets a trophy mentality, and people ask, Stu, what do you think about everybody getting a trophy? I think it's fine for everybody to get a trophy if the winner also gets a better trophy. There it is. Everybody should get an attaboy, yes, good job, for participating to the level that they can. Everybody should be encouraged to do the things that they enjoy doing, even if they're not great at it. They should be encouraged to do those things. But that does not mean that the winner should get the same thing that the loser got, because in life, there are disappointments. And allowing children to manage those disappointments, like losing a game, teaches emotional regulation. If you don't allow a child to feel disappointment, then they can't learn to tolerate that disappointment. Taking away the disappointment doesn't make them stronger, doesn't make them more resilient. It causes them to not have to face the challenge at all, and then they can't learn to bounce back or keep going. Or kids not getting their way. In my office, I have all sorts of things that kids can play with in a lot of the ways that they want to play with those things. But there are limits that I set to a lot of the items in my room. And there are other things that I don't allow. I don't allow kids to just be on their phones for the entire session or whatever it might be. And sometimes kids will push back at those things. And I will say, for instance, the sand needs to stay in the tray, or Play-Doh needs to be played with on the table, whatever it might be. And they'll say something like, well, I don't want to play with Play-Doh on the table. I want to play with it right here. And I'll say, I understand, but Play-Doh is to be played with on the table. And they'll say, I don't want to. And I'll say, well, if you'd like to play with the Play-Doh, it needs to be on the table. And they might push back more, whatever it might be. But they're learning in my office that you're not always going to get your way. And it's not that I'm going to look at them and say, oh, okay, well, this time you can sit on the floor and grind the Play-Doh into the carpet. No, you are going to have to move to the table. Now, I don't jump on them and I say, no, I said you need to put the Play-Doh on the table. I don't get there. I just calmly continue to say the Play-Doh is for the table, because I understand that them not getting their way is difficult for them. I see a lot of times where parents and teachers and caregivers of all kinds will jump in and just start screaming at a child who is not getting their way, and the child is trying to negotiate, without remembering and realizing that that child is having a tough time trying to learn to tolerate not getting their way. We have to be patient with kids as they are developing this emotional regulation and this coping skill and this resilience for emotional situations. But eventually, kids move to the table with the Play Doh. And then there's problem solving in relationships. Parents will tell me that there are kids who are always getting in fights with their siblings or always just arguing with their siblings, and they say that it's driving them wild to have to negotiate all these different things that are going on with the siblings or with friends or peers. If you're a teacher, maybe you've got some kids who just are always arguing, and I'm not talking about physical fights. That's a different situation, but if it's an age appropriate, developmentally appropriate challenge where they are just arguing with each other, it's healthier if you don't try to fix that thing for them. If they are arguing with their sibling about uh, who gets the remote or who gets to pick the show or whatever it might be, then it's not for you always to step in and say, oh no, you need to do this and you need to do that, because it doesn't teach kids how to keep going through the tough times in relationships or how to bounce back from difficult situations in relationships. It can also build some communication and negotiation skills when kids are forced to work out their problems on their own. Now, if you've got one child who is always winning those arguments or always winning that problem solving negotiation, and you can see that it's starting to affect the other one, then yes, absolutely step in and do what you need to do, but do it as little as possible. Just because kids are arguing and just because kids are loud doesn't mean that it's yours to just step in and fix for them. Allow them to go through that challenge so that they can bounce back after a challenge and they can learn to keep going through the challenge. Those small struggles that are so hard to watch kids go through allow children to practice that frustration tolerance and develop patience. It also shows kids that effort and persistence lead to growth, which fosters a growth mindset. And in our world today, in that world where we've given every kid a trophy and we've awarded everyone 5 stars and an A+, it's gotten too much to be about everyone is supposed to always be perfect at everything. And that's not the case. And as an adult, you know that, and I know that, but we have to foster that growth mindset in kids that it's okay to be here and want to be here and have to give effort to get to where you want to be. That's okay. And that's a brilliant part of living. If you just always have accomplished everything you've wanted to accomplish, then life becomes much less exciting. But if you're working hard and you're staying persistent, then you can be so proud of yourself and there can be so much confidence that comes from continuing to go even when things are hard and as you're growing along the way. It builds resilience. If you have ever seen your child grow stronger after overcoming a challenge, like this video and share it with other people. And in the comments, leave a comment about a time you saw a child in your life grow stronger after overcoming a challenge. It can be so difficult to watch kids go through those really tough times. But it is so important that parents don't just hover and become a helicopter parent that takes away all of the difficulties and challenges that their children are going through. So here's a question for you. Are you helping your child grow resilient, or are you accidentally hovering too much? You may have heard of the helicopter parent. If you haven't, or just so that we can have a standard definition of a helicopter parent, it is someone who is always hovering over their child. These are the parents who their child is constantly texting them throughout the school day, letting them know any sort of mild discomfort that they've faced, and that parent is calling the school and saying that the school is wrong in causing their child to go through this discomfort. It is the parent who is always stepping in and doing things for their child, even the things that their child can do for themselves. They are just doing it for them. And it's the parent who, in the end, is so stressed out because they have taken on the responsibility of doing everything for their child, managing every difficulty, managing every discomfort for their child. And that is much too much stress for any person. So let me share some actionable ways that you can actually back off the hover and allow kids to struggle a bit and really build some of that resilience. The first one is to let kids take small, age and developmentally appropriate risks. That could be something like climbing a jungle gym on the playground, and they're climbing up, and maybe you are worried that they're going to fall, and guess what? They might. Or maybe it's allowing them to, yes, climb that tree. Or maybe it's, yes, allowing them to go sledding in a few weeks when the snow has covered the ground and it's going to make them go fast. But you can see there's no real major dangers around. It's going to be scary, and there are chances that they could get scuffed up or bruised or whatever it might be. And yes, there's the possibility that they could break their wrist or their arm, or forbid it, but break their leg. There are those possibilities, but if you prevent a child from ever taking any risk that could lead to anything, you are just going to wrap them in bubble wrap and keep them in bed all of the time. And then guess what? Their skin is going to start to shrivel up because they're in that bubble wrap. And then they're going to get bed sores because they've been laying all the time. There is nothing in this world that is 100% safe all of the time. Let kids take small, developmentally and age appropriate risks. And if you'll do that, it can build some of that resilience, that when they fall off, or when they get scuffed up, or when they get a broken bone. And no, we don't want kids to get broken bones, but sometimes they do. And we want them to know that even when those things happen, they can bounce back and they can keep going. You can also encourage them to solve their own problems. If they come to you and they say, tell me what to do here, or how should I do this, or what do I do? You can look back at them and you can say, how do you think you could fix that? What do you think you should do? They come to you and they say, so and so has done this thing. Maybe it's a sibling. So and so just told me that I don't get a turn on the TV, that I don't get to pick the next show. Can you go tell them to give me the remote, whatever it might be? You look at them and you say, well, what do you think you could do? And they'll come up with some options. Some might be great options, and some might be options that you really hope they don't follow through on. But encourage them to solve their developmentally appropriate problems. Maybe they are not, they don't have a supply that they need for something that they're wanting to do, and they come to you and they say, we need to go to the store to get X, Y, or Z. And you can look back at them and you can say, maybe you could find something else that could work just as well. And it causes their brain to develop some flexible problem solving skills that maybe they didn't need an exact popsicle stick for their thing. Maybe they really could just go grab a stick from the backyard and use that in whatever way that they are needing their quote unquote popsicle stick for. You can encourage those problem solving skills, and you can provide emotional support by validating their feelings while encouraging them to try again. A counterpart to that helicopter parent is a safety net parent. So a helicopter parent prevents the child from falling. A safety net parent is there when the child does fall. And this really comes in when it comes to emotions and this emotional support. Validating feelings instead of trying to fix emotions and encouraging kids to try again rather than preventing them from ever having to try in the first place or by doing it for them just because it became uncomfortable. That emotional support, that emotional safety net is a really important thing for parents to be rather than just preventing the fall, being there when they fall. And I want to talk really quick about the danger of trying to fix emotions or fix problems for kids. When parents and teachers or other caregivers rush in to fix emotions and say things like, don't cry, and not in a mean way, not in a don't you dare cry or big boys or big girls don't cry, not in that way, but in a don't cry, oh don't cry, you're rushing in and trying to fix it, or in a it's okay don't be sad, or oh it's okay don't be scared. What happens is kids internalize that emotions are something to avoid or something to fix. And that can add stress because then kids start to think that feeling sad or angry or frustrated is wrong. And you can see how emotions are not something we can't just say, oh, I'm going to feel this way. Emotions come and go, and we don't always get to choose how our emotions are, that they just come on in different ways. So if you are telling or sending a message to a child that a certain emotion is wrong, then when they feel that emotion, they're going to panic because they're going to think, oh, this one is one that I need somebody to fix for me. I've got to take care of this. This one has to go away. And emotions are not something to fix. And no emotion is wrong to feel. It's about building tolerance and regulation of those emotions. And the way to do that isn't by rushing in and trying to fix the emotion that adds stress. Instead, allow kids to sit with their emotions and validate them. You can look at them and you can say, I see you're upset. It's okay to feel that way. When I was a young child and a little older too, I would go to my mom and I would say, I am just so bored. Or I'd go to my dad and I'd say, I am just so bored. And their response back to me was, it's okay to feel bored sometimes. It wasn't, oh, okay, let's sit down and come up with a list of things to do. Oh, I don't want you to ever feel bored. Let's make sure that we have this list. Oh, you don't like that? Okay, well, let's do something else. Oh, you don't like any of these things? Let's go buy something then because I can't. Oh, you feeling bored is just the worst. Nope. They looked at me and they would say, it's okay to feel bored sometimes. Oh, oh, you're bored? It's okay to feel bored. And what that does is it shows kids these are not things to panic about, they're not things to fix, and it doesn't have to cause all of this major stress. You can sit with it. And as you learn to sit with it, you learn to tolerate it because you understand that what you thought was this huge deal isn't as big of a deal. And you learn to regulate it because if you are forced to deal with it, you will find a way to deal with it. In that same way, letting kids handle age appropriate problems or allowing kids to face age appropriate risks without interference teaches them that they are capable. When you rush in and you fix it for them, you are sending the message not only that this is something that needs to be fixed, but also you are sending the message you are not the one who is able to fix it. Self-regulation is the ability to tolerate and deal with your emotions and your impulses on your own. And so when kids constantly are having this message sent to them that other people need to be the ones to step in and do it for them, no wonder kids these days are having quite a bit of difficulty with some of those self-regulation skills. Show them they're capable. Allow them to build that confidence. Allow them to build resilience. Back off the hover, become the safety net. Let them take age appropriate risks. Let them solve some problems on their own and let them learn to sit with those emotions. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tips on building resilience in kids without hovering. Let's talk now about really the science of resilience. I'm all about why things work and how they are working, not just that they work. So I've told you some of the things that work. Let's talk now about why those things are working and how they are working to develop resilience in children. Here's what's really happening in your child's brain when they overcome a challenge. Challenges in children engage a part of the brain that is right behind the forehead. It's called the prefrontal cortex. And that part of the brain is responsible for all sorts of things. And if you have watched any of the videos on my channel, you have likely heard me talk about the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for executive functions. Those executive functions are things like decision making and critical thinking. If children are just always having things done for them, then the connection to the prefrontal cortex doesn't have an ability to develop. And let me explain. That prefrontal cortex is there, and it is somewhat connected in a child's brain, but it doesn't really form a strong connection until age 12. And that full connection doesn't develop until age 25. That is why still college students and people right out of college are still making decisions that make people my age and older, and people older than me are looking at me saying the same thing. But we look and we're like, oh my goodness, what were you thinking? And really, they weren't. That part of the brain wasn't fully connected. That decision making, critical thinking part of the brain wasn't fully connected. Now, in order to connect that part of the brain, it has to be through practice. The way that part of the brain comes online fully isn't just by time. It comes on faster and stronger when it's allowed to be pressed, when it's allowed to be required. If you think of it kind of like if you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. If you don't use it, it never has the ability to develop. So allowing children to go through things that force them to develop decision-making and critical thinking skills, like overcoming and bouncing back after challenges, those things require the brain to assess problems, evaluate options, and choose solutions, which builds mental flexibility. If you work with children, you know that flexibility can be very difficult for kids. It's one of the reasons why them not getting their way is so hard for them. It's not that they're trying to be little punks. It is that flexibility is hard because flexibility is a lot to do with that prefrontal cortex. So if you force children to develop some of those skills, it's not to say that they're going to be able to develop all these skills at age 8. There is a limit because of that connection that is not fully taken place just yet. But the more you allow them to face developmentally appropriate, that's the word, developmentally appropriate. I guess it's 2 words, but let me say them again. Developmentally appropriate challenges, it builds that connection. If you are asking something of a child that is just impossible for them, or they are unable to meet the expectation, it does not create that connection. But if you are pushing them to be just one step farther than where they may be comfortable, or a few steps farther than where they may be comfortable, it forces the brain to build more connection. When it's something that's way out of their reach, like sitting still and being quiet for 7 hours a day at school, that is not something we should be asking children to do. It's not something that's going to build a pathway. But if it's, hey, for the next 45 minutes, here's what we're going to do, and then we're going to take a break. That's going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it pushes the brain to build some of that problem solving, development. It builds some of that connection to the prefrontal cortex. And then each time a child successfully handles a challenge, their brain reinforces that connection, especially to the prefrontal cortex, that helps regulate emotions and process decisions. There are all sorts of chemicals in the brain, but there are some chemicals that when they get released in the brain, it reinforces that was a good thing. There's one chemical that's called dopamine. So when a child overcomes a challenge, there is a large amount of dopamine that gets released into their brain. Dopamine is a reward chemical. It helps kids feel good. It helps you feel good. It helps us all feel good. If you have felt positive and proud of something, it is because your brain has released some dopamine. Well, that dopamine is a reinforcer. It is saying, ooh, do that again. Yes, that was good. Ooh, I liked that. Do that again. So when you allow a child to successfully handle a challenge, that connection is being built and some dopamine will get released to tell the brain to do that same thing again. And as they learn to do that, then more dopamine is getting released. And over time, that connection becomes very strong and they're able to regulate their emotions and process some decisions. Over time, not just immediately, but over time and consistency, those pathways can become stronger, and those pathways to the prefrontal cortex are what make it easier for a child to self regulate and tackle future problems more independently without experiencing the challenges. The brain misses those opportunities to practice those vital skills of problem solving and decision making and emotional regulation and persistence. All of those things are prefrontal cortex level abilities. And it's not something we should just expect children to get right away. It's something we are going to have to allow them time and persistence and consistency in facing those things time and 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 time again, over and 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 over. And over time, they'll get to do it better and better and better until that connection is really strong. If you don't allow the child to face a challenge, they can't learn to bounce back from it. They can't learn to keep going through it. And that connection to that prefrontal cortex will be much weaker than if you had allowed them to go through it and struggle. That connection is a struggle, and allow them to struggle and allow that pathway to struggle to make its way. And then that neural pathway is reinforced from the dopamine that comes from feeling proud after overcoming the thing. And over time, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And that is the science of resilience. It's not just this behavioral thing. It's something that kids have to develop because of that connection to the prefrontal cortex. So the way to develop that the best is to allow kids to face developmentally appropriate challenges. And as they go through those things, those pathways are reinforced. And those pathways are the things that lead to greater ability to tolerate and regulate and decision make and problem solve. And as they do that, that resilience grows because they see not only they can do it, but it feels really great when they do. If you find that as fascinating as I did, make sure that you like this video and follow and subscribe to the channel for more science-backed parenting insights. We have talked now about what resilience is. We've talked about backing off the hover. We've talked about some ways to implement resilience into children. We've talked about the science of resilience. And now I want to tell you about some things that you can do every day. That it's not just you have to find something, like you have to find a risk for them to take, or you have to find a problem for them to solve, or you have to uh, force an argument or anything like that. There are some things that you can be doing every single day to allow your child to build some resilience skills. So if you want to know that easiest ways, and maybe not the easiest, if you want to know some simple ways to help your child grow more resilient, let me tell you, there are some things that you can just allow for your child. The first is to allow what are called natural consequences. There in the world there are two types of consequences. There are natural consequences and there are what are called logical consequences. Logical consequences are the consequences that people focus way too much on. These are things like punishments. They are additional things that are added to what a child has done. It's supposed to make sense. That's why it's called logical, but a lot of times they don't make sense. But these logical consequences are things that are added on to kids after they have done something disruptive or after they've made a poor choice. Natural consequences are things that just happen. Nobody had to do anything to the child for their disruptive behavior or for their poor choice. It just happened. Allowing natural consequences builds resilience, builds tolerance, and builds regulation of both emotions and behaviors. Let me explain. For instance, if a child forgets their homework and they don't turn, or maybe they don't forget it, they don't turn in their homework and they get a low grade or they get a zero on that assignment. If you rush in and you call the teacher and you say, how dare you give them a zero? They shouldn't have to turn it in. They had it done, whatever it might be. And you take that away from them and you don't allow them to experience that natural consequence of dealing with the disappointment of getting a low grade, then you have taken away from them the opportunity to tolerate and regulate themselves. You rushing in and fixing it for them has told them that, as a matter of fact, not only was that not a mistake that they made, they can do it as many times as they want in the future. They can continue to not turn in their homework. They can continue to not get their homework done because you have shown them that you are just going to fix it for them. That every mistake that they have made, you're just going to rush in, fix it, and they're not going to have to face any of the consequences of those things. Allow kids to face those natural consequences. I had a parent who called me and asked what they should do because their child forgot to turn in a permission slip for a field trip, and the child was very upset that they didn't get the field trip permission slip turned in on time. And I said, well, it sounds like they're going to miss the field trip. And the parent said, you mean I shouldn't call the school and I shouldn't try to negotiate this for them? And I said, well, you can ask them if they want to negotiate and ask if they can turn it in the next day or whatever. But you rushing in and fixing it for them is not going to make them remember the permission slip next time. If you allow them to either deal with the disappointment of not going on the field trip or dealing with the difficulties of negotiation and asking and having maybe a difficult or uncomfortable conversation about this permission slip, then that will reinforce in their brain, you need to make sure you remember the permission slip next time. But if you just fix it for them, then their brain says, oh, well, that's not something we need to take care of. Great. All of us are trying to do the least amount of work that we possibly can. I love what I do. But in the end, at work, in life, we are all trying to do the least amount that we can in order to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. Kids' brains are no different. If they see, you know what, they're going to handle that for me, they are not going to adjust themselves to now start to handle it. They're going to say, oh, not my responsibility. Great. Let me back off. Allow kids to face some of those natural consequences. It can be things like the homework, like the permission slip. It can be things like falling off of a bike and not wearing the right, maybe they were supposed to wear pants instead of shorts. They were wearing shorts and they fell off and they scrape up their knee. That's a natural consequence. On the flip side of that, that also means you don't have to add on a punishment or add on another consequence for it. Just let them face whatever the natural consequence was and learn from that thing. So allowing kids to face natural consequences is a great daily way to allow them to build resilience. And there are positive natural consequences. They turn in the homework, the teacher says, good job. That is a natural consequence. They turn in the homework, they get a positive grade. That is a natural consequence. They turn in the permission slip, they get to go. That's a natural consequence. So let kids face both the natural consequences of their disruptive and difficult behaviors and poor choices, and let them face the natural consequences of their positive behaviors and their positive choices. It builds resilience and helps their brain form a connection to say, here's what we should do and here's what we shouldn't. Another thing that you can do every single day is to praise effort over results. Celebrate trying hard, even if the outcome isn't perfect. I love to do art. I am not a great artist. There are some pieces of art that I have done that I am very, very proud of. But most of the time, I am just scratching and doodling and just all over the place. And it is not something that's going to get hung up in a museum, but it feels good for me to do it. And as I've done it more, I've gotten better at it. If I would have just drawn one thing and not been pleased with it, thrown it away, and then never wanted to try again, then I wouldn't be developing a skill. I wouldn't be getting better over time. It encourages some perseverance if you will celebrate for them that, oh my goodness, I can see you tried really hard at that. Good job. Wow. You kept going. Oh my goodness. Wow. Look at that. You worked really hard on that. Not always does it have to be, oh my goodness, that's the best piece of art I've ever seen. We need to call the museum and get them to hang it up. It doesn't have to be that. It can just be, oh my goodness, I see how hard you tried on it. Maybe they played a game, and I talked earlier about the trophy mentality of either giving everybody a trophy or only giving certain people trophies, whatever it might be. Maybe they don't lose, maybe they don't win the game. They lose the game, but you can look at them and you can say, "Oh, you played so hard. Like you were in there. I could tell. Well, look at you. You played much better this time than in your last game. What do you think about how you did?" And praise that effort over just the outcome. Praise how hard they were trying, not just where it ended up in the end. And that builds that resilience. It tells them that effort it takes to get through a challenge is worth it, that there is reward even before you get to the end, because some challenges are challenges kids are going to face for a long time, years and years and years. So it's not about trying to get them to the end of it. If they see that, then they're going to say, no, I'm going to give up before I get there. But if they see that every step along the way was worth taking the next step, they'll keep taking that step, and that resilience will grow. Another thing you can do is just encourage independence. Let kids handle age appropriate tasks. It could be packing their lunch, it could be solving small conflicts, it could be whatever. There's too many examples in my head that are all trying to get out at the same time. But one thing that I try to teach people is this mantra: I will do what you can't do, I won't do what you won't do. If it's just that you're not going to do it because you don't feel like it, me neither. I'm not going to do it either. But if it's something that is impossible for you right now, then I'll step in and take over that thing. So let kids pack their lunch. Let kids resolve conflicts. Let kids pick out their clothes, even if it looks silly to you. Let kids do the things that are developmentally appropriate for them. And over time, they'll be able to do more and more and more and more and more. Kids who build that resilience early are better equipped to handle major life stressors like the pressure that comes from academics, struggles in social situations, or even failures that they go through later in life. That resilience also boosts confidence, it builds adaptability and problem solving skills, and those are critical for success in both childhood and adulthood. So, try to implement some of these things into your daily routine. Allow kids to face those natural consequences, positive and negative. Praise some effort over just the outcomes. and encourage them to be independent with everything that they can be independent about. On top of all that, not just being able to do more, but emotional regulation that is developed through small struggles and age appropriate struggles can reduce the risk of mental health challenges like anxiety or depression as they grow. As you allow kids to face things and see, oh, what I thought was this big deal and what I thought was going to be the end is not, I can keep going, it allows them to see that they can do it. It builds confidence, and in the end, it builds resilience. Like, share, follow, and subscribe to help more parents learn how to raise resilient kids. I see over on Facebook just in time, I've got a story from Cassie who wants to share about a child in her life who showed resilience. Let me read this out. A child got into a physical altercation at a scout camping weekend. The consequence was to be put on hiatus with the return to scouts in September. He has learned strategies and skills to help him walk away before escalation and also to accept help and reminders for strategies if he's in the process of escalating. He and the other scout he fought with have actually found common ground and get along. He still pushes their buttons, but he has developed skills to help him. Do you see? It's not about trying to take away that challenge. And that is a beautiful, beautiful story. Thank you so much, Cassie, for typing that out and for posting that. It's not about trying to take those challenges away. And it's not about that it's going to be this clean, simple, easy, quick fix, nothing's going to happen kind of thing. In that story right there, there was an ability to face natural consequences. There was an ability to work through problems with a peer. There were problem solving strategies. And then there's even emotional and behavioral and impulse regulation all built in there. Why? Because you didn't step in and just fix it for them. And yes, there was disappointment. And yes, there was difficulty. And yes, there were all sorts of other things. But in the end, your child is stronger because of it. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I'm sure so many more have stories just like that. If you have a story about a child in your life who showed resilience, please post it in the comments. I'd love to see, read, and be able to share it with others in the future as well. We have come to the end of today's episode of Bad Kids Don't Exist. I have had a blast talking about resilience, talking about what resilience is, talking about why it's so important, talking about the science of resilience and some ways that you can build resilience in your child, stop the hover, become the safety net, do what they can't do, not what they won't do. And I hope that it has been helpful for you. If it has, make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on the future episodes, and it also helps others find this content. If you enjoyed just this discussion, I am available as a keynote speaker or a workshop leader, and I love helping adults better understand kids. I help adults better understand kids so that kids and their caregivers can thrive. If that sounds like a good fit for you and an event or a training that you have coming up or one that you might need, then please check out badkidsdon'texist.com/booking. There you can find all the information you need to hire me as a keynote speaker or a workshop leader. I would love to hear about your event and make that next event a great one. Until next time, remember, some things exist, some things don't. Bad kids don't exist. Peace.